The Auditor-General provides assurance to Parliament on the accountability and performance of the Victorian public sector. The Auditor-General conducts financial audits and performance audits, and reports on the results of these audits to Parliament. On the 19th of August 2015, the Auditor-General tabled his performance audit report, Unconventional Gas, Managing Risks and Impacts. The audit assessed whether Victoria was prepared to manage the challenges of unconventional gas, or UCG, should the government lift the moratorium. We found the risks and impacts of UCG in Victoria have not been comprehensively identified or assessed. There are major problems in applying the regulatory system to manage the risks and impacts, and, if UCG industry goes ahead, Victoria needs to implement the leading practices that other jurisdictions have identified for managing these risks and impacts. UCG refers to underground sources of natural gas. Based on its location, it is identified as coal seam gas, CSG, tight gas, or shale gas. Hydraulic fracturing is often required to release UCG from the rock layers. It involves pumping water, chemicals, and sand into the gas well under high pressure to fracture the rock and release the gas. It is always needed for shale and tight gas, and sometimes for CSG. CSG also requires a lot of underground water to be extracted before the gas can be released. The scale of risks posed by UCG is greater than that posed by other gas and mining activities. It requires more drilling at more sites, often in areas that underlie existing land uses, particularly agricultural land in Victoria. Although UCG exploration activities were approved in Victoria in the early 2000s in both the Otway and Gippsland basins, commercial production has not occurred for several reasons. The exact location, extent, and commercial feasibility of these resources is still uncertain. Victoria already has access to conventional gas from large offshore reserves, and, more recently, the moratorium on many UCG activities has dampened industry's interest. The audit examined whether Victoria is well placed to respond to potential environmental and community risks and impacts of UCG activities in the event the moratorium is lifted. It looked at what is known about the risks and impacts and how these have been addressed, how effectively the existing regulatory framework has been applied to activities, and what opportunities there are to improve the regulatory system. The audit assessed the activities of two departments, the Department of Economic Development, Jobs, Transport and Resources, or DED-JTR, and the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, or DELWP. There are significant challenges in developing a sustainable UCG industry, including potential environmental and social impacts and land use conflicts. They apply across the life cycle of gas development, from exploration to decommissioning and aftercare. Numerous scientific reviews indicate these risks can be managed if an appropriate regulatory system is in place and administered well. DED-JTR has not comprehensively assessed the risks associated with UCG activities in Victoria. Until 2012, its identification of risks was informal and ad hoc. It assumed these could be regulated using the existing system. Since 2012, DED-JTR has made good progress in identifying and assessing the key risks to water resources and community concerns around UCG activities. But other important gaps still exist. DED-JTR, in partnership with DELWP, needs to develop a risk-based strategy which transparently documents its approach to address this issue. The regulatory system is not yet ready to manage UCG activities. It does not address the distinct risks and impacts that these activities pose, particularly large-scale and cumulative impacts and potential land use conflicts. DED-JTR's approval of UCG activities has not been risk-based, nor has it effectively overseen industry's compliance with regulatory requirements. For example, it did not identify or target specific risks through its inspection and audit programs, and has not implemented the recommendations of our 2012 compliance audit. Compliance issues that it has identified have included poor rehabilitation, failure of fire controls, and aquifer breaching, none of which led to any penalties, a review, or change to its approach to regulating these activities. DED-JTR is working to address some of these issues, but still needs a suite of reforms to improve regulation and its oversight of environmental performance. There are opportunities for DED-JTR and DELWP to improve the early identification of sustainable areas for UCG activities and the regulation of these should the industry proceed. Most importantly, there is currently no land use planning to determine whether extracting gas in a particular location will sustainably meet community needs and safeguard the priority economic, environmental, and social values. DELWP and DED-JTR need to make sure these assessments are made before any areas are released for exploration. There are also no mandatory environmental and social impact assessment processes. Instead, they are at the relevant minister's discretion. Rights of landowners and other affected parties are not fair and just. Compensation is limited compared to other states and does not extend to affected communities. Community consultation obligations are also inadequate. This can have a disengaging effect upon the community. DED-JTR, in consultation with DELWP, needs to improve land use decision-making to identify sustainable UCG development areas prior to granting any licenses. The following slide shows the steps that such an approach may take. Please refer to section 4.3, pages 52 to 58 of our report for discussion of this approach. The Auditor-General has made 14 recommendations. Action on 2 of these is needed to inform the government's decision about the moratorium. 9 are only required if the moratorium is lifted. There are 3 that will benefit the regulation and management of all earth resources activities. The recommendations also address 4 themes. The first is about developing a transparent and coordinated risk-based approach to identify and assess the key risks and potential impacts associated with UCG, and determine whether these can be managed in Victoria using the best practice controls. The second is about reforming the regulatory system by incorporating leading practices to address the risks specifically posed by UCG activities, as well as other improvements that will result in a best practice risk-based management of all earth resources activities. The third theme is about DED-JTR needing to improve its approach and oversight as a regulator. The final theme is about identifying sustainable areas for UCG development, and doing this early. DELWP and DED-JTR need to develop a land use plan and mandatory impact assessment processes based on a more comprehensive strategic resource assessment. DED-JTR will also need to improve the information it provides industry if it releases any areas for UCG development. This slide summarizes the key messages from the audit and the key items that need to change for effective management of UCG activities should the moratorium be lifted. In summary, Victoria is not yet in a position to manage the risks and impacts associated with the development of UCG. Previous related audits are listed on this slide. All our reports are available on our website. If you have any questions about this or other reports, or if you have anything else you would like to discuss with us, including ideas for future audit topics, please call us on 03 8601 7000 or contact us via our website.